I just wanted to welcome everyone to Building an Agile and Innovative HR Function for Startups. I'm really excited about the group that we've put together today. And, just seeing the folks that are joining, it looks like we've got people joining from all over the world. I've seen the UK, Amsterdam, and then, of course, across the US. So that's really exciting. And I wanted to start off just by giving thanks to Enrique at Hacking HR for pulling this event together, especially given a lot of the circumstances today. It's really shown that this community, more than ever in this industry, has to find new ways to engage and share and learn from each other. So excited to be able to do that today with all of you. So maybe I'll start with introductions, and what I'll do is I'll ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves. And we are missing one panelist, Charles Ashworth, who is the Chief People Officer at Copper. Unfortunately, had an emergency come up, so it'll be the four of us today. Great. So I'm Christine Tao. I'm your moderator today for the panel. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Sounding Board. We are based in Foster City in California, just south of SFO. And our mission really is to bring scalable leadership development to people and leaders at all levels in a company. And we do that today with a coaching platform and a leadership development platform that combines best-in-class executive coaches with technology to deliver that seamless experience. And in starting the company, I've had the pleasure of working with some really innovative HR leaders, some of which have given us their generous time today. And I've really seen how companies and the HR function can drive innovation at the earliest stages of any company, and especially in startups. So I'm really excited to welcome our panel. Thank you all so much for joining. And maybe we'll start with you, Sheila, to do an introduction of yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, maybe an interesting HR challenge you've had to tackle as you've gone through, both startups and enterprises.
Okay, hi, my name is Sheila Ryan. I'm the Chief People Officer at a company called Clear Capital. We are actually located, I'm here today in Truckee, California, which is in the mountains, the Sierra Mountains, about 3 hours northeast of San Francisco. I moved here from San Francisco, and they've just moved their corporate headquarters to Reno, Nevada. So we're up and down that 80 corridor. I've worked in startups from less than 50 people up to a company of 30,000. And the challenges are all sort of the same, just a little bit different by the people that you're working with. And most of it is everyone thinks that they're the only ones in a chaotic environment. And they're all chaotic and they're all going through a lot of change. That's the way the world is. I'm having a hard time thinking of that unique challenge, Christine. I think that the hardest challenges for me come in the flavor of actually working in an established company like I am now, that you have processes and systems set up, but you have to rework them. So you're trying to unwind at the same time that you're trying to start up. So while a startup is chaotic, you have a blank slate, and that is oftentimes, it's crazy, but it's easier because you have no preconceived ideas and you're not taking someone's fingers off of something that they've owned and saying it needs to be redone. So I would say that's a challenge that I've faced.
Great. And Mai, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Live from New York. I used to be the HR leader at 6 different tech companies, most of them primarily based in San Francisco. I'm now a solo consultant because I really wanted to have an impact on more than just one company at a time. So I formed a business, I consult now, and I parachute in. For a lot of these, what we're going to discuss are these HR initiatives and programs and thinking for the future. So I'm excited to be here. For me, I've had the fortune of leading teams and growing the function, because a lot of times I find that leaders generally don't know the capabilities of a lot of people team members. They just view us all as recruiters. And so it's been nice for me to see all of the new HR technology that's out there and to really grow a community of leaders who are trying to break the reputation of HR leaders as just general mere compliance and legal folks. So excited to share with you what I've learned in my 15-year plus career.
Great. And we just had Beth, but it looks like she might have dropped off. So, there you are.
I'm here now, and my connectivity is a little spotty. I apologize. So I think the question was to introduce yourself and then talk about your biggest challenge. Is that correct? I didn't hear it.
Yes.
Okay, so I am Beth Steinberg, and I'm in San Francisco, and I head up people and talent at Chime. I have been in people and talent for many years, about the last 20 something years, both at some Fortune 500 companies like Nike and Nordstrom and EA, but mostly in the world of startups and building startups. And I think, similar to what Sheila said, I think some of the biggest challenges that I find in trying to figure out how you balance putting in systems and process while still remaining flexible as you scale. Because I think, sometimes you see what's ahead. You might see things a year out or 2 years out, but the organization may not be ready for some of the things that you're ready to do. So I think you really have to have a balance of building a foundation, building for scale, while also remaining flexible that things are going to change and figuring out how you bring people along for that journey.
Great. Well, look, when we brought together this panel, we wanted to give a broad perspective and sort of come at this from the point of view of that journey of, even trying to figure out which companies and startups are really ready for a head of HR. And then as you come into the organization, how do you think about starting to build some of these processes and these programs in an environment where there might not be an HR function, or you might be, a small group serving a very, very large base of employees. And so I'd love to just start there. In our prep, I thought you had a really interesting response. We were talking about how do you know that a startup is ready for a head of HR and to really be investing in the HR function. So would love to hear some of your thoughts.
Yeah, maybe I can talk about my experience at one specific company named Trulia. I was employee number 100. And the interesting thing there was that they had gone through a blitz of hiring. And then they said, oh my gosh, like, what do we do with all these people now? So all of the recruiting operations and the interview training and all of that was done and put into place. But then they said, oh my gosh, now what do we do to retain them? What do we do to engage them? And that's typically the first sign that nothing's really on fire, nothing's broken, but it's just that moment in time where now you have a real set of people. It's no longer the 5-person startup in the garage anymore. It's now, people's livelihoods are at stake, and how are you going to keep them for the long run? And so I found that was the one moment where I've had the pleasure of always being the first people leader into some of these smaller startup organizations. And that's where they put me at the earliest, is sort of like, okay, tell us what we're supposed to do, or tell us what kind of tech stack you need on the HR side. Tell us, like, how do we train them? What do we do? And so that's been sort of the pride and fortune that I've had of building a lot in the very beginning. But those are like the telltale signs that you just don't have the infrastructure yet built for growing an organization.
Sheila, were you going to join in?
Yeah. Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, well, I just thought, did you have any other thoughts? You look like you were leaning in.
Well, I think often they don't get that person at that time. You need someone who really values and understands HR, and as Beth was saying, who can see a year or two in advance, because generally what you're doing is you're hired at about 200 or 250, or maybe even 150, and you're going backwards cleaning up. So if you're lucky enough to have an executive team that understands that there's some infrastructure that needs to be put in at the earlier time, that's great. If nothing else, it's reach out to your network if you are that department of one, and figure out what are the things that are really critical to do now that will save you a lot of work down the road. And as horrible as it sounds, a lot of it to me is data, making sure you have your data clean and consistent. So when you're ready to roll into an HRIS or do something, you're not working backwards and cleaning up a lot. So that would be my advice. A lot of times they view recruiting as HR. As Mai said, everything was beautiful on the recruiting and onboarding side, and then it was done. So the more that if you're that first person, reach out to your network, look for best practices, and try and put in some standards ahead of time, because you will save yourself a lot of work down the road when they are actually ready and say, oh, we really need some professional view here.
Great. And I mean, maybe I'll build on that a little bit, which is, I think all of you have had the opportunity to be the HR leader, but you've probably come into different size organizations and different size staff, right? Like you said, Sheila, sometimes you might be an organization of one, and sometimes you might, luckily, hopefully have a team around you to support you. How have you thought about how you balance what you're able to prioritize and accomplish based on, smaller team versus a larger team? I ask that as I noticed in our chat, a lot of folks here seem to be smaller HR teams. And so they're wondering how they can continue to contribute and drive value and impact when they may only be themselves or a very small team.
Beth, do you want to go?
I'm sorry, my connectivity is really challenging right now. I didn't hear all the question, Christine. If you could just paraphrase for me quickly.
How have you balanced being a smaller team and still being able to drive impact?
Okay, so I think one of the most important things is to figure out how you think about kind of the two different parts of the function. The business partnering and how you're going to start building relationships with the business and really start moving things from reactive to proactive, and also all the operational things that need to get done. Sometimes in an early stage company, that might be one and the same. But my advice to people is to really try to make, kind of a bespoke differentiator between business partnering and hire at least a business partner early on, and the operational part separately. So you can really start building that muscle around organizational development and scale and getting people used to moving from reactive to proactive.
You also have to assess what do you hear the founder usually, the executive team talk about the most, because there's some really easy wins. So as Beth said, you're always dual tracking. You show a few quick wins that kind of reduce their anxiety, and then you get to some of the harder, meatier stuff. So for me, it's usually something around training or the culture fun party part that they always think is our entire job. You do something to satisfy that, and you just make it look good and easy. Do easy. Don't go overboard. And then on the backside, you're working with the partnering and the org and the data, because that's the stuff that will make the difference down the road. But to them, if you attack that first, you're wasting my time. I don't see anything. So they need to have something visible that is important to their heart, whatever that is. And you'll hear it in your interview, in the words they say and how they talk in the all hands meetings. You know that there's something that you could get a quick win with.
What have been some of those examples? You talked about parties. What are you seeing as things that are near and dear to the executive team's heart, or even to the employees' hearts, in terms of their expectations out of the HR function?
Some of it's onboarding. How do you onboard and make people feel welcome? Learning and development. Do you put some sort of class or some sort of lunch and learn together, something really kind of easy? You just make it look really good. And it's not hard. It's just you have to do it. So some of those programs that hit a number of people up front is usually what I find is the one that gets them, because they want to see something visible. The data and all that back end is not visible and really doesn't mean a lot to them until they do.
Yeah, I echo Sheila in terms of just going for a quick win. And one of my favorite things to do is to use the great tools that are out there now. And two of them, I will name them. One of them is Culture Amp and the other is Glint. But these are employee survey platforms. And so these are anonymous engagement surveys that you can send out to your teams. And what ends up happening for me, in my experience, is that people love those forums. When you ask them questions that are specific to how an organization is doing well or what an organization can do to be better, you'd be surprised at the amount of comments that people are willing to give you. I think in the companies where I've worked, it's usually under 500 employees, but in every engagement survey that I launched, I had like over 250 comments, open-ended comments. And for me, that gives you a very quick flavor of like what's going on in an organization and some of the, I guess they call it easy hanging fruit that you can tackle first. And for me, what that has done is allowed me to establish credibility early, because I'm not just telling stories or anecdotes based off of just one-on-one conversation. This is actually data that's very useful. And so I would encourage anybody who hasn't started to do this yet to really utilize these tools, because that's what can kind of take you from being seen as tactical to being seen as strategic, and to Beth's point, to be more proactive about what you can see coming around the corner that maybe others can't.
I agree. I use Culture Amp in each new role.
Me
It gives you
too.
the data. It gives you the validity. I'm not just, as you said, telling you a story because one or two people told me that this was a issue or something we need to tackle.
Do you find, the flip side of that sometimes I've heard is with the data collection, there's an expectation that gets created from employees, right? Now they're sharing feedback about their needs and the areas that they need support around. And so it creates almost an onus on the company on how do they respond. And so how do you, as an HR leader, meet those needs of the organization as you've generated and collected that data if the organization or even your executive leaders may not be ready to make all of those changes that you see or the data is telling you? Yeah.
Well, I think I'll go. One of the things that they really do, they help you significantly, and they tell you focus. Like, don't try and boil the ocean. And these are the areas based on all the algorithms that are going to get you the most bang for your buck. So first of all, when you're spending the money to buy it, you're already selling the executives on what you're doing. And that if you're going to survey, you have to be ready to take action. But it does help you focus and say, we can't address everything, so we're going to focus our energy on these one to three things. And so that's how you, from my perspective, that's how I've been able to do it. And they've all bought into it because I saw someone say data driven. It's data. They love data, and it's like 73% of your people say this is a problem, this is good, whatever that is. And they have the aha moment and are ready to work on it because they want to see the improvement in the next year too.
I also think it's important to really involve employees in that process. For the last several years, last several companies I've been in, we've had a process where we had something called Survey Champions, where we got employees really involved in the process by having an employee from each department who looked over questions, made sure we were asking the right things, encouraged participation, and then we really drove the onus to the business leaders on developing action plans for their own department. And then, like Sheila alluded to, we really focused at the corporate level where we had three things that we were going to focus on that we're really to keep doing, and three areas that we needed to gather more data, things that we potentially needed to fix. And that ends up working pretty well.
Yeah, and I would just add that, sometimes a lot of executives and sometimes a lot of people in general don't like the anonymous nature of some of these survey tools. But I can tell you that, when you go out to a restaurant, sometimes you'll look at Yelp and look at the restaurant review, kind of check it out. It does give you a flavor of like, hey, this restaurant is good or this restaurant's not so good, or here's the best seller at this restaurant. And people use that, and that's data that's usually just anonymous because they have, like, it's like Christine T. You don't know who Christine T is, but you're willing to take a stranger's opinion about a restaurant, and yet, like, you won't take it about a survey that's been launched to employees in general. So I just usually try to use the Yelp analogy to say, hey, if you can trust a stranger with where you're going to eat, then maybe you can trust your employees that what they're saying and what they're trying to tell you might be a little valid, right? Might have some truth to it.
No, that's great. I love the analogy. I actually, one of the things that I've learned as I work with HR leaders that to me wasn't immediately obvious is that the really strong ones are great communicators and storytellers because you're able to help paint those stories and drive those stories through the organization. And so it's always great. And for me, and think about just, having concepts stick in people's mind and really being able to carry those forward. So we've had a little conversation about some of these initial building blocks. It sounds like culture amp, engagement surveys are important. Are there other important building blocks or tools that, like Sheila said, you bring it into every startup or every organization that you come into that's really helped you become more effective, position the HR function as more strategic?
I have a model that I have used for a long time that helps me think about how I scale a company. And that model it's pretty simple. It's a foundation of leadership, having the right leaders in place. And then it's 4 different areas that you may focus on more at one time than another, but eventually equally you need to focus on all of them to scale. And that's culture, structure, talent, and management systems and process. And when I talk it through with leaders and employees, they really seem to relate to it. And what I find is most companies focus on 2 of those things, especially in early stages, and that's talent, bringing people in. Everyone knows you have to do that. Culture, even if it may be misguided, people understand that you need to focus on culture, but rarely on structure, which can end up causing a lot of issues if there's not clear roles and responsibilities, clear lines of accountability, and management systems and processes. So how are you going to standardize and make easy a lot of the things that you need to put into place that may not be the most interesting or, things that you really want to work on, but they're really going to hurt you long term if you don't.
Yeah,
back just one more, Beth, and when you talk about structure, what does that mean to you?
So it means a couple things. So it means organizational structure. So who reports to who? What is the structure of the leadership team? And well, that isn't really usually important early on. Inevitably, you'll be at a company where you could just find everybody to talk to, and cross collaboration was really easy because you knew everybody. But as the company grows, you need to be much more deliberate about things like, how is product interacting with engineering? If you have a sales function, how is sales getting information from product, and how are they building something that the customers really want? And so making sure that there is both an organizational structure that works for that, and that you have the different systems, processes, clear lines of communication and accountability so you can actually solve those things. My experience has been in startups is when there's issues, people usually think it's lack of resources, and so they add people without dissecting what's really going on. And I often find that it's lack of understanding of the structure or lack of management systems and processes. So I think you've got to be really deliberate about it.
I feel like everything in HR boils down to roles and responsibilities. Every problem boils down to that, which is that structure and communication. Like, who's responsible? What's the role? and understanding how you fit within the system.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a very big part of it. And I have a saying that I have always found to be true. Nobody comes in to sabotage the company. So nobody comes in and they're, like, I really don't want to do a good job today. So if something is not working, it's usually because something's not clear. They're not getting the support, the training, the resources they need. And I think, Sheila, you're right. A lot of times it is because there's not clear communication, or there's not clear lines of who's responsible for what. And so, when there are issues, I often try, or always try, to dissect what's behind it. And I think you're right, Sheila. Many times it is one of those two things, or a combination of those two things.
Yeah, I would tell you my experience. I think nowadays there's a lot of demands on people leaders, so that we're supposed to be approachable, we're supposed to be the voice of employees, we're supposed to, coach the executive team. I mean, there's a lot of different, there's a variety of different roles within this people leadership track. But I can tell you that the reason why I love being in startups is because you get that operational flow. You get the ability to influence like how these structures are set up and what tools you will choose to manage things like a compensation process, or, an org chart. Like, who manages all of that today? Besides like Google Docs and, just PowerPoint slides, whatever you can use, like that stuff can't scale over time. So for me, I will, like, similar to the engagement surveys where I love Culture Amp and Glint, I will tell you that the new generation of HR software, the HRIS systems, are powerful tools. So two of my favorites are Namely and Bamboo HR, because their reporting functionality is amazing. It has, especially Namely has like a Facebook-like feed, so whatever information that you need to get out to employees can be sent on a push of a button, and so all of your global employees receive it at the same time, because in the past that was an issue. They have org charts, so you can see who reports to who, but also who indirectly affects that line or that vertical. And then they have all employee data. They have awesome reporting capabilities. So when somebody asks you, like, what's our employee headcount or what's our turnover rate, you don't struggle to find those numbers. Those numbers are there in those tools for you. So in addition to creating credibility and sort of being a strategic partner, the more you can dig into automation and tools, the easier I have found my life to be, because then they know I'm not making up numbers. They know I'm not making up stories. I'm like trying to like move the business forward and stay proactive and get ahead of some of the employee issues that perhaps Beth, Sheila, Christine, that we see coming around the corner that nobody else is actually looking at quite yet.
Yeah. I mean, I think that having a regular cadence of metrics that are sent out fairly widely within the organization is quite important. And I've also done kind of lunch and learn sessions with employees where I've shown them the metrics that we are looking at and trying to describe to them why we look at certain things and why it matters. Because I also think people who want to be people leaders need to understand, turnover. Even though maybe the turnover was not voluntary turnover, something still went wrong. There's something went wrong in the hiring process. Maybe something went wrong in the onboarding process. Maybe you weren't clear on the job description and the roles and responsibilities because you hired that person. So something was right in the beginning. And so really trying to get leaders engaged in the people data and in getting employees as well to understand why that data is so important, such an important part of how we do our jobs, just like every department should be looking at their metrics and data.
Yeah, and Beth, I can tell you, like, sometimes it isn't, like, these tools don't cost that much in the grand scheme of things. because to your earlier point, it isn't just about like solving the problem with hiring more people. Like, I think that is the default for a lot of companies that I've worked with, is sort of like, oh, we have a gap here, so let's hire this person because that person will fill the gap, when the gap has nothing to do with like people resources. It's more like, hey, there's technology out there nowadays that you can really plug in so that you don't actually need a human to solve that particular problem or that particular gap. It has nothing to do with that. So I'm a big fan of being in HR at this moment in time because of all of the technology and tools that we have finally access to. I just wish I would have invented them myself.
There's a lot of good ones.
What are some of those metrics that you think are critical that you're always looking at, that your executive teams are also looking at?
Turnover for sure.
Yeah.
So I had the pleasure of working with a CEO who had a PhD in mathematics from MIT. It's wonderful when you can learn from people like this, because I can tell you that a lot of us measure turnover and engagement scores and hiring rates, all of those things that you generally see. But what he tried to instill upon me was, you need to give me leading indicators, because all of those things are lagging indicators. It's already too late when somebody's left the company. That doesn't do me any good. So he challenged me and said, you come up with 2 leading indicators that we can track every month, because then I can do the math. I can do any math if you give me the right data set. So the 2 leading indicators that I created for the company one was our hiring funnel. It was sort of like, do we have enough people to get through the pipeline to land on the right hire? Because if we didn't fulfill our hiring plans and our forecast, then we knew something was in jeopardy in the roadmap that we were trying to create. Because without enough people to create like a product feature, we just knew we couldn't create the feature. So that was one of the leading indicators of whether or not we had reached out to enough people to find that one hire we needed. And then the second leading indicator, which you might find interesting, is manager level attendance at learning and development sessions. Because what we were trying to also assess there was, were the managers serious about investing in their own time to learn things that they should be learning as a manager? Like, your job and our job all together is to make employees successful. So if they believe that to be true, they should be showing up to these opportunities that a lot of HR folks offer, right? Some of us do the teaching ourselves, some of us outsource, some of us are lean and mean, so we get our teams to teach, but we tracked attendance. And so those were the 2 measurements that I really learned to pay attention to, because it sure enough signaled something to us early enough so that we could course correct along the way.
Yeah. I mean, I look at those 2 as well. And I also look at, from a talent perspective, where we're getting people from. Are people coming in organically? How are they hearing about us? Because I think, there's so many, obviously, job opportunities out there right now, especially in technology. I want to make sure that we are amplifying our voice as an employer and developing an employee brand as well as an employee value proposition. So really trying to articulate why someone would want to be at Chime. And I think that shows a lot around your clarity of thinking. Are our leaders invested in this? And then I also look at attendance of learning and development opportunities. And I then try to look at, does that have any correlation to turnover and culture amp score in the department? Now, that's a little bit of a manual process that I've had to use to look at that. But when I was at Brightroll, we did find that there was an uptick in the satisfaction of your manager. There's a section that's all around, how you think about your manager, for the leaders who attended all the learning and development sessions. Now, I don't know if that was causation or not, but it was certainly an interesting antidote to look at.
Yeah, a few years ago, I knew someone who did big data at a very large company. And through his data analysis, they were able to directly correlate sick time to the managers that had one-on-ones and those that didn't.
Interesting.
So we all know they're valuable, and he proved it there. So I don't have that ability right now, but we have moved to career conversations out of the standard annual performance review. And we're going to be tracking, did you have a conversation and did you find it productive? And then I want to do some analysis around that and where's our turnover. So I'm not there yet, but this is the stuff that I'm planning because I know that value of that conversation between the manager and the employee, and I want to back it up with data.
And how do you engage your executives around that, right? Because the common refrain we hear at Sounding Board is that the HR leader might be really subscribed to investment in the managers and developing the managers. But you also have to make sure that that sponsorship is coming from the executive levels. And so how do you think about engaging your executives who are modeling a lot of that leadership behavior, management behavior, to really enroll the rest of the company and show that this is something that's important, right? One thing I understood your point around looking at attendance of the manager trainings, but there's so many things that impact that actually may not be within the control of the people, right?
Yeah, it may not. I mean, when I think about how to really sell or get support around people attending, learning opportunities, I really put it back to building bench strength and scale. So if you think your company's going to grow, it is absolutely critical that you have the people to help support the growth. And, I believe in having kind of a long-term talent planning process where we're looking at, where is the business today? Where is the business going to be 12 or 18 or 24 months from now? What are the capabilities and competencies that we're going to need then that we may not have now? And then you have kind of, multiple tracks you need to take. You need to look at developing people internally and acquiring people externally so you can meet your business objectives. So I really try to always tie it to building out capabilities to drive business outcomes.
Yeah, for me, I can tell you that I, at the core, believe that employees stay at companies where they are learning. And I don't mean to say it's just technical learning as in they're going to be really good at product. It's sort of they're there to learn from the people around them and from not only in their core domains, but also leadership skills. And so that's always been sort of one of my philosophical beliefs. And I feel that because of that, I then get buy-in to getting budget for learning and development programs or getting trainers to come in here and teach specific things. Because in my span of time that I've been an HR leader, it wasn't the ice kombucha and the massages and the healthcare benefits that people were talking about. It was actually they wanted to grow. They wanted to know how they were doing. They wanted to make VP in 2 years, even though they were only 22 years old, right? That's the new workforce that we have now. They're very ambitious, and I love their ability to be able to say, I know what I want to be, and this is where I want to be, and this is what I'd like to do, and I'd love your help in getting there. That's like my dream employee. And so as I talk to the executive leaders about sort of the tools or the things that I need for a people team to be successful, one of the core ones is definitely just the core belief around we're all here to learn and grow.
I think also with the survey, you have the manager ratings in there, and you can take people back in their journey. Their manager made or broke their experience. So you talk about that. The constant fight is about time. Like back in the old days when you could have managers go through a 1 week or 2 week university, those are gone. You can't even get them for a full day. So you have to adapt the learning to short bursts where they get some experience, and then they come out raving about that, and you just keep building on that. And I haven't found a hard time really convincing the leadership. It was more about the time stuff. So how do you get to have snippets of training so that it's interspersed as opposed to taking them out of the work for a long period of time?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I have found kind of two ways to augment that. I mean, I obviously think coaching and, what Christine's company is doing around democratizing coaching, I think has been incredible for companies. It really has, I think, been a game changer for so many companies where, coaching at this level was not accessible to, mid-level or first-line leaders. And then I also think, formulating the training where you have content, get people to practice, put them out and have them apply it, and then come back and get feedback is so much a better model than really going away for a week and going to a class, because they're really able to learn in a practical way and not in just a theoretical way.
And just a little personal note, my 11-year-old daughter just got home from school, so she opened up a Cheetos bag. So that's the noise that you heard, so forgive me.
No worries. This is what I love about our modern workplace, right? And being able to show all sides of yourself, even when you're on a panel with people worldwide. Look, I think and one, thank you so much for the thought. I mean, obviously we are big believers in coaching, and I think especially in startups, what we see is that people are so busy and your conditions are changing very quickly, right? And what you're asking for out of your managers is a lot of adaptability and the ability to flex to different situations. And there might not be a prescriptive way of leading that will work for you. And as the company changes, you might actually need different skill sets and capabilities. So, I think being able to move into these types of agile models give you a lot of leverage from the people side. I'm curious, and somebody asked here, is how do you balance that continued investment versus knowing, when to retain, when to let go, especially in the early stages when there's not a lot of structure and there's so much institutional knowledge in your early employee base? How do you sort of think of balancing the performance and then the development?
Gotta think about that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. We're going off script because I'm kind of coming in with, so.
I feel like that's where a culture piece comes in too. Because if there's a lot of broken glass that you're cleaning up from that person, they're doing much more damage than all that institutional knowledge is providing benefit. So that is something you have to figure out how to. This sounds terrible, but we're HR people. We know we're all replaceable. Maybe not as a person. I can't replace the relationship, but someone else can come in with our skills. It might take some time. We might lose some stuff. So I think a lot of times executives get scared and, oh my God, we can't survive without this person. And you can, but you have to try and prepare and get as much knowledge out as you can through the roles and responsibilities and the structure, as Beth was saying. But you also have to think about the cultural piece of it. Do they have tribal knowledge and a historian that everyone looks to? Then you're going to invest more in the development. If they're not, and they're breaking glass all around the organization and really causing more pain, then you have to figure out how to get them out, because they're destroying your culture at the same time, and that is not going to help you move forward.
Yeah, and I also think you have to be pragmatic when you're in a startup, and that there are people who are happy and productive in a 100-person company, and at 500, they may not be happy and productive. And I don't think that says anything negative about that person. I think that's people are going to adapt to different situations in different ways. And, I'm not a big company person. I don't do well in big companies. It's not good for me. And so I know that. And so I think, I don't believe in the premise that all turnover is bad turnover. I think people are going to come and go. And again, I don't think putting a judgment around that is the right thing to do, because, people have to do what's good for them. You need to do what's good for the company. And there is going to be a tremendous amount of change over the evolution of scaling a company.
Yeah, and I would add that most employees who are long tenured, as in they started in the earlier days, to both Sheila and Beth, your point, I just feel like they know when it's wrong for them. They know it, and so it starts to show, and then their colleagues around them also feel it. So it's sort of like the worst kept secret, because everybody's either just waiting for him or her to get their next gig, or they're looking to sometimes HR to let go of this employee. And there's no delicate way to do it, but I do think that that's why the relationship between the manager and the employee is so important. There has to be some trust of like, you know what, when, I don't know, Christine, when you tell me that I'm not like firing on all cylinders and I'm not doing well, there's usually a reason for it. Because to Beth's earlier point, like, people want to come into organizations and make an impact. They're not there to sabotage anything, right? We all want to make that impact. And so it's just about being kind enough to give somebody direct feedback, but also allowing them to tell their side of, yeah, it sucks for me because I'm used to 10 people. Now we're at 1,000 people. It's just not right for me. But that conversation becomes very difficult the longer you prolong it.
I think it's also valuable. When I was in a startup, we had some big employee meetings where I went through all the different parts of the organization and talked to them about that what we call the curve of a startup, and those major inflection points. When you get to this number, then you have people opting out and saying, because what was happening was the rumor mill. Aren't you worried? All these people are leaving. Those were the people who are like, tapping out. It's too big now. I'm going back to a 10-person company and I'll get it up to 200 and I'm out again. And so we also told stories. Can you imagine hiring someone from IBM, thousands of people being really comfortable with us right now? And they're like, no. So then why would you expect someone who was really comfortable with 5 people being super comfortable now at 500 or 200 or whatever that is? Like, people have their comfort zones. And then we get to the next stage, and then we get to the next stage, and you are going to have this flux. So helping people be comfortable with this happens, and this is the arc of a growing company. And this is why we started too. Like, we're being successful. We wanted to be public. We wanted to have all this growth. So we actually are on track, and it's just helping people get through that emotional curve.
And I think it's important that the company demonstrates that that's not going to be looked upon negatively, because, like, for example, if you have somebody who is an early employee, they're no longer happy at the size, and you're very open about a really amicable transition for the person, then other people are going to be more open to actually saying, hey, I'm in that same place. I felt guilty, or I didn't want to be judged. It's going to make it easier. I think, it says so much about a company and a person of not only what you do when you hire that person, but what you do when that person is leaving the company. And that amplifies from a cultural perspective like crazy throughout the organization.
Well, and also even out to new hires coming in, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So much information out there today for you to be able to understand a company's culture and values before you even talk to somebody or a hiring manager. And so, and I think that's one piece that often gets left behind. Mm-hmm. We have one specific question just back on our prior topic that I wanted to make sure we got to, which was, we have some folks that are international. Michael has said he's based in South Africa, and he said that sometimes they struggle with getting HR people to understand the importance of training in creative and innovative thinking rather than just getting a process result. So he was wondering if you have any tips around that.
I mean, I think one tip is to try to perhaps do a small pilot around something in that realm and demonstrate the outcome. And if it led to a positive business outcome, a positive result for the people involved, then perhaps, build on that success and try something a little bigger. Because I think people are scared of what they don't know. And if they're not used to that, they might not understand what it looks like or the impacts that it's going to make. And perhaps demonstrating it in a small way might get people convinced that it's the right thing to do.
I actually think that for a lot of companies want innovation, and they need creative thinkers and innovative thinkers. But in order to create that culture, I believe that the company has to move past measures of just pure results, of whether it's revenue, whether it's a roadmap, whether it's a product that's been launched into the market. Like, the job of everybody on the leadership team is to actually see individuals as more than just their work, so that I have found success in making sure that you're measured not only on your results of whatever your MBOs or OKRs are, but it's sort of like, what are these other things that we want for our people? We want to be known for having awesome people. Well, that means that they are not just good at what they know, but that they are creative. They've kind of launched, and there's so many stories like this where, for instance, Amazon, right? When you give people time to think, what ends up happening is they create products for you that they had no idea, nobody even had on the roadmap. So AWS at Amazon is a good example of how that was a employee-led initiative that started from one employee's mind. And so there are many instances of that. Vimeo, same thing. They created video content for the world and realized that through an employee's mind, he said, you know what, you can actually create some stock videos so that people can kind of get a head start. And those are products that are launched from individuals that weren't on their goals, weren't as part of their OKRs, they were rewarded for them. But yet these businesses kind of took that idea and ran with it, and now they have successful businesses based upon that. So that's, I think, the responsibility of the leadership team, to see you beyond just revenue.
And I think to Beth's point about business partnership, that's where you break down the executive team one by one, where you have conversations with them and help them walk through what are some of their roadblocks. And innovation and creativity, they want to change the world. Most likely, they're not going into something that's already been done 50,000 times and doing it the same way. So at some point, you'll get them on the creativity, and you might get that one leader who will pilot it with their group. You have peer sets around that can also share with you, but that's the biggest thing to me, is to break them down. You're not going to convince an entire group of executives in one meeting showing them a bunch of statistics. You have to make it a problem that they feel and help them see that creativity is something that they want to get at, that's blocking them.
Well, it looks like we have about 7 more minutes. And so I'll kind of put a call out to the rest of the audience to see if there are any other questions that we have left. And then also, at least while we're waiting for those questions to come in, as you think about your priorities, and for folks that are really coming into a startup and trying to be creative, trying to be agile, are there a couple of things that you can share in terms of tips around how they might prioritize all of the different initiatives and, asks that come to the people organization?
Yeah, I mean, I usually build a plan. So I haven't been at Chime very long. I've been here 4 months or 3 months, and partially it was the holidays, so it feels like a lot less. And so the first thing I did was build a plan of who I need to get the work done. And so I built a hiring plan, thinking out over the last year what we need to do to accomplish the work. And then I broke the work down in phases around building the foundation, next stage of developing leaders and doing some of the next level work that needs to be done, building for the future in, quarter 3 and 4, and then iterating and really looking back of what worked and what didn't work. And we have a very comprehensive plan by quarter that we're sharing with the whole company. And so I think you've got to just sort of think about what you need to accomplish, both short term and long term, write it down, and do a business plan like any other function in the company would do a business plan. And I think that really has helped me organize my team and my work, and also show the company, here's what you can count on my team for.
I did similar because we already had an established team. I went through and interviewed my peers, interviewed my team, did a leader onboarding, called all the data into saying, here's the issues and here's how I'm going to attack them. This is the staff I need. These are sort of the what you can expect over the next year and a half of the things we need to do. There's a part of us that wants to attack it all at once, and an organization can only handle so much change. But as you implement each new practice, process, program, they start seeing results and then give you more leeway and more leeway. It also builds your team's credibility so that you can make change for the organization and start accomplishing your goal. So you do have to be thoughtful about it and proactive. And that's really what strategic means. It becomes an overused word, but you have to show here's some of the gaps and here's how I want to attack them, and figure out what order makes most sense for your organization.
And maybe I'll just chime in because I think Melania Ramos was asking about like how do you really get them to see you as strategic rather than tactical. I would always ask this question, which I was taught a long time ago to ask, but it's sort of, what are you trying to solve? Like, what problem are you trying to solve? Because when you view whatever initiative or program through that lens, you have to be able to articulate, like, is this a big problem? Is this a small problem? Is this an urgent problem? Is this a like around the curve problem that only you see? Like, you have to be able to articulate what it is you're solving for. And until you can do that, you have to stay a little bit tactical, and you have to kind of go for those easy wins whenever you can. And that's why I think like the engagement surveys and some of the HR tools can help you really build the strategic roadmap, because it does take deliberate, thoughtful planning how much you want to tackle. Because I'm telling you, HR has changed so much, and we are not only the holiday party planners, we're the cultural ambassadors, we're the IPO, we lead IPOs and M&A due diligence. I mean, it is crazy some of the things that are demanded from us, which is why I think it's an awesome time to be in this field. But that's why, you know, Christine's company Sounding Board exists too, because I can tell you I got coaching from Christine's team because I was drowning. Like, there was so much to get done that I couldn't do the tactical and the strategic at the same time. So you have to use the resources of the community. You have to attend sessions like this so that you can get more training, get more learning, because it comes from all different places. But the more you practice articulating whatever your strategy is, the more credibility you'll gain, and you'll be known as strategic in the end.
Well, thank you all so much for the time. You know, one thing that we do a lot at Sounding Board and we talk a lot about is naming, you know, just naming the thing. And I think one of the things I really saw as we were doing this panel was actually naming the things that you're doing is showing just how agile these functions you're building are, right? You were using words like test and learn, piloting, trying, you know, being okay to fail. You know, you were talking about putting together a roadmap, right? And a lot of these things are actually how product and engineering teams are building software. And it felt like a lot of you are taking that very similar approach in how you are building out your people function. But I think what happens is a lot of times, because it's not named and it's not said explicitly, people don't understand that you're actually building these very agile processes. So, you know, for me, I think a great takeaway for me is really just being able to name that and speak that in the language that resonates with others can be a major way you shift that thinking from, you know, tactical to strategic and really elevating the people function. So So we are actually at time. I really want to thank all of you for participating. Thanks again to the audience and Enrique and Hacking HR for pulling together this amazing virtual event. If you have questions, a lot of this content will all be posted on the site, and I think all of our panelists have ways that you can reach them. But thank you again all for your participation, and it was just such a pleasure.
Thank you.